Hey, everyone. I've been sitting on this story for a few days now, debating whether I should post it or not. My brain is telling me none of it could have happened the way I remember it, but my body, it's still reacting like it was real. I haven't been able to sleep properly since, and I'm starting to think I'm losing it. This happened last week in my apartment. I've lived in the same place for about 3 years. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a regular one-bedroom place in the city. It's a pretty old building, but it's cozy and has never given me any issues. At least, until last Wednesday. I was having a regular evening. Finished work, made dinner, and sat down in front of the TV to zone out for a bit before bed. The night was still, no weird sounds outside, no strange feelings or anything like that. Around midnight, I decided it was time to turn in. I walked over to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, and as I looked at myself in the mirror, I got that creepy sensation like someone was standing behind me. You know the one. But when I turned around, there was no one there, just my empty, dimly lit bathroom. I chalked it up to tiredness, finished brushing my teeth, and went to bed. That's when things started to go south. I was lying in bed, trying to drift off, when I heard it, a faint sound coming from the kitchen. It wasn't loud, more like a soft scraping noise, like something being dragged slowly across the counter. My first thought was that it was a mouse or something, but I live on the 5th floor and had never had a pest problem before. Still, I figured I should check it out. I reluctantly got out of bed, tiptoed down the hallway, and peeked around the corner into the kitchen. I didn't see anything at first. The kitchen looked just like it always did. But then I saw it. My chair, one of the 4 wooden chairs around the small dining table, was out of place. It had been pulled back like someone had been sitting there. I knew I hadn't left it like that. My pulse quickened, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I had bumped it earlier and just didn't remember. I pushed it back into place and went back to bed. But as soon as I lay down again, the noise started up, this time louder, like the chair was being dragged harder across the floor. My heart was in my throat now, and I debated whether I should get up again. It was a ridiculous situation. I didn't believe in ghosts or anything supernatural, but I knew what I was hearing. It was real. I decided to grab my phone and record it. If there was something making that noise, I wanted proof. I crept back toward the kitchen, phone in hand, recording as I approached. The sound stopped as soon as I got close. I turned on the light and found the chair was pulled back again, but this time, it was facing the hallway. Almost like someone had pulled it out and turned it to look down toward my bedroom door. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The chair wasn't just pulled out and turned. The legs of the chair were embedded in the floor. I'm talking inches deep, like the wood had melted and fused with the tiles. I froze. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. I didn't know what to do, so I stood there, staring at the chair like it was going to do something else. And then the scraping sound came again, but this time, it wasn't from the chair. It was coming from the walls. Slow, deliberate scratches like nails or claws dragging along the inside of the walls, moving closer to where I stood. I ran. I bolted back to my bedroom, slammed the door, and locked it behind me. I could still hear the scratching, louder now and closer. It was moving toward my bedroom, almost like something was crawling through the walls. My head was spinning, and I grabbed my phone to call someone, but as soon as I unlocked it, the screen glitched out. The numbers blurred, and the screen went black. At this point, I was in full panic mode. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I was paralyzed with fear, my body frozen, even though my brain was screaming at me to do something, anything. And then, just like that, everything stopped. No more scratching, no more noises from the kitchen. Just silence. I sat there, in the dark, my back pressed against the door, waiting for something else to happen. Minutes passed, but nothing came. Slowly, I worked up the courage to move. I crawled into bed, pulled the covers over my head like a child, and stayed that way until the morning light crept through the window. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The next morning, everything looked normal again. The chair was where it belonged, no signs of scratches on the walls, and my phone worked fine. It was like the whole thing had never happened. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw. Since then, though, I can't shake the feeling that something in my apartment has shifted. It's subtle, but the air feels heavier, like I'm not alone. I've noticed things out of the corner of my eye, small movements, shadows that vanish when I look directly at them. I've been sleeping with the lights on, but it doesn't help. I don't know what happened that night, but it feels like my apartment turned against me. Has anyone else experienced something like this? I feel like I'm losing my mind. OP, what you experienced is something I've read about before in a few paranormal cases. There's a term for it, the imprint phenomenon. Essentially, when an environment is exposed to intense emotional or traumatic energy, even if it's not directly related to you, that energy can start to manifest physically in bizarre ways. Sometimes it takes years for it to show up, which could be why you hadn't experienced anything in your apartment before now. The idea is that places can absorb the emotional residue of past events, especially in older buildings. This energy might not always show up as a full-blown apparition or anything, but it can mess with physical objects, sounds, and even how you perceive time. That chair thing? I'm guessing the force behind whatever's in your apartment was trying to get your attention. The fact that the legs were fused with the floor is beyond disturbing. It shows it's not just a haunting, but a distortion of reality itself. The noises in the walls? I hate to say it, but they could be a sign of something trying to break through, like a breach between our world and, well, whatever exists beyond. You're lucky it stopped when it did. You need to be careful. I don't want to scare you, but if this is an imprint that's now awake, it might not just go away. You might need to bring in someone who knows how to deal with this stuff. Maybe a paranormal investigator or someone who deals with energy clearings. In the meantime, don't engage with it. Try not to acknowledge it too much, because that can sometimes feed the energy and make it worse. But definitely keep documenting things. You're not crazy. This stuff happens, and now that you've seen it, it's probably not going to stop on its own. Stay safe. He was completely freaked out at this point, but tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some kind of plumbing issue, or maybe there was something wrong with the insulation. He convinced himself it had to be something explainable and went back to bed. But then over the next few days, things got worse. It started with the lights. They would flicker, but not in a typical electrical issue kind of way. The lights would dim in one room, but stay bright in another. Sometimes they'd pulse, almost like they were breathing in sync with the shifting walls. One time, when the lights dimmed, he swore he could see something moving in the shadows, just a flicker, like a figure standing still in the dark, watching him. Then, the temperature in the apartment started to fluctuate. It would get freezing cold in one corner of the room while the rest stayed warm. At night, his breath would fog up as if the temperature had dropped below freezing, but his thermostat would still show it was normal. He bought space heaters and even blankets to try and stay warm, but they barely helped. It was like the cold was seeping in from somewhere deeper, like the apartment itself was trying to push him out. A few weeks in, the physical objects started acting up. Books would fall off shelves, the kitchen cabinets would creak open and shut, and sometimes the faucets would turn on by themselves. At first, he thought he might be sleepwalking or just forgetting things, but after the third time, finding all the kitchen drawers pulled open while he was standing right there, he knew it was something else. The final straw came one night when he was lying in bed, trying to ignore the usual scraping sounds. Suddenly, the walls weren't just shifting. They started bulging out, as if something was trying to push its way through. He said it looked like hands were pressing against the drywall from the other side, creating these impossible human-shaped distortions in the surface. He jumped out of bed and ran toward the door, but as soon as he reached for the doorknob, it wouldn't turn. It was like the whole door had been fused to the frame. He started panicking, pulling at it as hard as he could, but it didn't budge. Meanwhile, the bulging from the walls got worse. He said it felt like the room was closing in on him, like it was alive and didn't want him to leave. At this point, he was full-on screaming, kicking at the door, pounding on the walls, desperate to get out. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The walls went back to normal, the door swung open, and the air went still. He bolted out of the apartment and didn't come back for days. He eventually had to move out. He never got a straight answer about what was happening, but after doing some research, he found out the building had a history of weird occurrences. Several tenants before him had complained about similar phenomena: scratching noises, objects moving, cold spots. One guy had even reported seeing a woman standing in his hallway in the middle of the night, only for her to vanish when he turned on the lights. My friend still talks about it sometimes, though he tries not to dwell on it too much. He says that once he moved out, things stopped happening to him. But he occasionally has nightmares where he's back in that apartment, trapped, and the walls are closing in on him again. I don't know what's going on in your apartment, OP, but it sounds like whatever my friend dealt with. My advice? Start looking into the history of your building. There might be something there that could explain it. And maybe, just maybe, consider getting out while you still can. OP, what you're describing reminds me of something I've come across before in paranormal research, and it sounds less like a typical haunting and more like an entity, something that's actively trying to make contact with you. Not in a friendly way either. I used to work closely with a group of paranormal investigators, and we encountered a case similar to yours. The symptoms started small, like what you and others have mentioned. Furniture moving on its own, strange noises in the walls, fluctuations in temperature, etc. But then it escalated, just like what you're experiencing now. We were called in by a family who had been living in this house for about 6 years. The place had always had some strange quirks, lights flickering, the occasional bump in the night, but they never paid much attention to it. After all, it was an old house, and old houses creak, right? It wasn't until they started remodeling the basement that the real trouble began. The husband noticed these dark stains on the floor, almost like the concrete had been burned or scorched in certain areas. They assumed it was from something the previous owners had done, maybe spilled chemicals or something during construction. But when they tried to scrub the stains away, they didn't budge. It was like they were embedded in the material, part of the foundation itself. Then, a few days later, the wife started hearing what she described as faint voices. Not full sentences, but whispers. They seemed to come from the corners of rooms, especially in the basement. But no matter where she stood, she couldn't make out what they were saying. She brushed it off at first, thinking maybe it was just the pipes or the wind. But the voices got louder over time, more insistent, like they were calling to her, demanding her attention. After that, things escalated quickly. The husband was working late one night when he heard something scratching at the basement door. He thought it was their dog at first, but when he opened the door, the dog was nowhere near the basement. The scratching continued, though louder this time, as if whatever was on the other side was trying to claw its way through. He slammed the door shut and didn't go back down for a while. But, like you, he tried to rationalize it. He figured maybe there were rats or something trapped in the walls. It was an old house, after all, but things started getting physical. Objects in the house would go missing, only to turn up in the strangest places, like a set of car keys inside the microwave, or shoes neatly arranged in the bathtub. Even more disturbing, one night the wife woke up to find the bedroom window wide open. She was certain it had been locked before they went to bed, but when she got up to close it, she saw handprints, child-sized handprints, on the outside glass. They didn't have kids. The real turning point was when the scratching noises turned into banging. They said it was like someone or something was pounding on the walls, but no matter where they looked, there was no damage, no source for the noise. It got so bad that they could feel the vibrations through the floors. That's when they called us in. We went to the house and started setting up our equipment. Cameras, EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, recorders, the usual. Immediately, we noticed an oppressive energy in the place, especially in the basement. It was like the air was heavy, thick with something we couldn't quite put our finger on. We stayed there for 3 days, taking shifts to monitor the activity. Over those days, the energy in the house seemed to build. Lights flickered constantly, and one night, a camera we had set up in the hallway was knocked over, despite no one being near it. The most unsettling moment, though, was when we picked up a clear voice on one of our recorders. It wasn't a whisper like the wife had described. It was a guttural, low voice saying one word, "Leave." We packed up our things and did just that. After doing more research, we found out that the house had been built on land that had once been used for, well, let's just say not so great purposes. Rituals of some kind, performed long before the current house was built. I'm not saying that's what's happening to you, OP, but it's worth considering that your apartment could be sitting on some negative energy that was never properly dealt with. You mentioned the chair was physically fused with the floor, right? That's not just an ordinary paranormal encounter. That's the kind of thing we've only seen when something powerful, really powerful, is trying to break through. You might be dealing with a kind of entity that's been trapped or bound to the building for years, and now, for whatever reason, it's waking up. I know that sounds terrifying, But there are a few things you can try before jumping ship. Sage or smudging. Some people swear by it for clearing out negative energy, though I'd recommend doing it with someone who knows what they're doing. If you just burn sage without the proper intentions, it might not help and could potentially make things worse. Reaching out to a paranormal investigator. If you're seriously concerned, get in touch with someone who deals with this professionally. They'll know how to assess the situation and tell you if what you're dealing with is malevolent. Avoid acknowledging it. This is something we've learned the hard way. Do not engage with whatever it is. Don't ask it questions, don't challenge it, and try not to even think about it more than necessary. Negative entities can feed off attention and fear, so keeping calm and grounded is crucial. Lastly, document everything. Keep a journal, make recordings, and take pictures of anything strange. Not only will this help you if you need to explain what's going on to an investigator, but it'll give you some control over the situation. I'm rooting for you, OP. You're not alone in this. Let us know what happens next. I hope this fits well with the thread. Let me know if you'd like more comments like this.